Christians get involved in politics? Now, I got George Washington up here. Did George Washington get involved in politics? Was George Washington a Christian? Well, he certainly got involved in politics. Question is, should we? Now, you're going to hear a lot of objections when you say Christians ought to get involved in politics. I'm going to give you 9 reasons why Christians should. 9 reasons why Christians should. And before I do, let me point out one other thing. Your pastor has more ability to talk about these issues than maybe he thinks he does. Do you know a pastor can talk about moral issues all day from the pulpit? A pastor can even tell you who he's voting for without having any problem with his tax-exempt status. The only thing a pastor can't do is he can't say, I'm voting for so-and-so as a representative of this church, and you should too. When he does that, he's crossed the line. Okay? I'm just talking about the lines of the IRS has drawn for achieving and maintaining tax-exempt status. But let me point one other thing out. Pastors were not called to be tax-exempt. We were called to be salt and light. So if we ever get to the point, and I don't think we're there now, but if we ever get to the point whereby we have to sacrifice our tax-exempt status in order to preach the gospel, guess what? That's what we're going to do. As I say, I don't think we're there yet. We're getting there, and you're going to see in future nights that we're getting very close. But right now, the IRS gives us enough leeway to talk about these issues and maintain tax-exempt status. Okay, but let me give you some reasons why we ought to be involved in politics. Perhaps the first reason, of course, is the fact that God created governments, and He created governments, as we said, to protect the innocent, and we're called to be salt and light in everything we do. We're called to be salt and light in government. We're called to be salt and light in business. We're called to be salt and light in education. We're called to be salt and light in everything that we engage ourselves in. There was a survey done. A friend of mine runs a ministry called Summit Ministries out in Colorado. Fabulous ministry that teaches young people Christian worldview. In fact, if you have any young people in here, or you know young people who are either a junior or senior in high school, or they're in college and they want to learn Christian worldview, they need to go to summit.org, and they'll go for a 2-week program, usually out in Colorado, near Manitou Springs, near Colorado Springs. Amazing 2-week program where you'll learn a lot of Christian worldview. Anyway, this gentleman by the name of David Noble, who started this ministry back in 1962, believe it or not, recently took a survey of Christian students. He put a list of disciplines and things that are common in our culture, things that we engage in our culture. He put, a list of disciplines such as business, education, and he got into the academic disciplines like biology, like psychology, like physics. He listed all those, and he talked about church as another thing. On and on. He listed all these disciplines, all these areas of life. And on the right side of the page, he had, I want you to check whether this is a secular enterprise or this is a sacred enterprise. 400 students took the survey. Only 2 got it right. Everything on the list is sacred. There is not one secular thing that you or I engage in, because there are no secular things. To a Christian, everything and everyone is sacred. Everything we do, we're supposed to be salt and light in. There's no separation of the sacred and the secular. The Christian is to be engaged in whatever you're engaged in a sacred way. The same is true about politics. Okay? Government, God ordained, and we're to be salt and light in government. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, of course, is we're citizens too. Are only atheists qualified to run the country? Where does it say that if you want to be in government, only atheists can be in government? Does it say that anywhere? No. Now, it is true. our country was not explicitly founded on Christianity. It was founded on principles consistent with Christianity, but there was no test, no religious test for government officials to be Christian. At the federal level. At the state level, there was. In fact, many state constitutions still have Jesus Christ in their constitution. And they required government officials to take an oath to Jesus Christ or to God. Of course, we still take an oath to God, but they required them to take an oath that they were true believers. At the state level. At the federal level, they did not. But the point here is that while they didn't have an official test to say that you had to be a Christian to be in state government, or federal government, I should say, they didn't have the opposite test either, that you had to be an atheist. All Christians, all faiths can participate in government. Christians, other faiths, and I would argue atheism is a faith too, but atheists can participate in government. So anyone ever tells you you ought not be involved in government or politics because you're a Christian, you ought to put your hands on your hips and say, why not? Are only non-Christians allowed to be involved in government? Where does it say that? Now, I hear a lot of people saying this too, and this thinking still goes on in our culture today, in our evangelical culture, I should say, and that's this, that we ought to be just involved in evangelism. Let's not get involved in any of these secondary issues like politics. Now, I agree, evangelism is a very important priority. I agree with that. There are a lot of very important priorities. But you know, evangelism is not our number one priority. What is our number one priority? Does anyone know? Yes, worship is our number one priority. Don't forget discipleship, too. Because Jesus didn't say, go therefore and make believers. What did he say? Go therefore and make disciples. One of the biggest mistakes in the church we're making today is we're just making believers who aren't really disciples. We need to make disciples. But we're also supposed to be salt and light in politics. And if you think that evangelism is a greater priority than politics, maybe it is, but let me just point one thing out. If you don't think that politics is important, never forget this. Politics affects evangelism. It does. If you don't think so, go to some of the countries I've been to. I've been to Iran. I've been to Saudi Arabia. I've been to China. You can't do what we're doing in this room right now in those countries. You can't evangelize in those countries, not legally anyway. What goes on in our government affects all areas of our lives, including our religious lives. That's one reason we need to be involved in politics. And there is a coming time in this nation, and we're very close, and you'll see when we talk about same-sex marriage here in the next couple nights. There's coming a time when you pick up the Bible, you might be fined or jailed for quoting verses that are inconsistent with homosexuality, unless we stand strong against this current movement. Because wherever same-sex marriage is put into law, the Bible becomes hate speech. And Christians become bigots. It's total nonsense, as we'll see in future nights. It's not bigotry at all, it's good common sense. But they throw all this at you. And legally, they're going to begin taking away our rights to practice our religion freely and to practice our free speech rights. In fact, there is a law working its way through Congress right now called the Hate Crimes Law. And that hate crimes law will basically make anyone who opposes homosexuality potentially liable for hate crimes.